Prototyping using your Figma variables is easier than you think, and today I'm going to show you how. So today I'm going to start off covering some of the basics, how to go from one variable to another, how Boolean Variables works. We're even going to cover some mode swapping as well, before we get into how we can change our variance using our variables. And then also we're going to look at equations and conditional logic. It's a real great lesson today if you're just getting started with prototyping with your variables. Let's dive in. All right, so let's start off looking at how we can change both our color, number, and string variables altogether. And again, we're going to start off with color to start. So color is a little bit more unique, a little bit more different in the sense that you can't actually go from one variable, color variable, to another just upon a simple item like a button click. You actually have to get into some more advanced elements of prototyping, like swapping between modes. But anyways, I digress. So let's go ahead and open up our local variables, and let's just create two simple color variables. So we got color 1 and color 2. So color 1, let's try setting it to maybe just a red, and then color 2, let's maybe try to find something that's similar to the UI collective purple. I don't know, something like that. I think is just fine. And actually, maybe what we're going to do, let's just work with one rectangle for now. So what we actually want to have happen is upon this button click where it says change variable, we are going to want to go from color 1, which is this red, to color 2. Now, if you haven't yet prototyped with your variables before, or you're just relatively new to it, this might seem a little bit new, what we're going to show. But again, if you're used to this before, this might seem a little bit basic. So again, on this button click, we want to change the color variable from red to that purple. So here I just have this sample button. And when I hit that button, I'm going to add an interaction that's going to say on click, we're going to set the variable color 1 to hex code. And this is one of the weird nuances associated with it, because I'm probably pretty sure that Figma wants to use mode swapping and not just as changing the variable upon some type of button click, specifically with color. But you actually can't go from with color, one color to another color variable on the set variable interaction state. Is you actually have to go from color 1 to hex code, which is a little bit unfortunate. But if I go back to my local variables, find that hex code, prototype again, and then add that hex code in. So if you're looking to prototype your colors, so change your colors upon some type of button click, is you actually have to go from color variable to hex code, which is a little bit weird and unfortunate, but it is what it is. So I'm going to go ahead and present this real quick. Fill that screen. And when I hit change variable, I can see the color changes, but you're just going from one color variable to a hex code. You know, you're not going from one variable to another. Again, as I mentioned, Figma just likely wants you to use color mode swapping. So in terms of prototyping and changing your colors, that's a real quick introduction. What we're going to look at next is actually changing our number variables. All right, so now let's look at actually changing our number variables themselves. And your number variables are kind of unique in the sense where at first you're probably thinking, if I want to go from 2 to 4, this is how I would do it. But with number variables, one of the beautiful parts of this is number variables are everywhere. And if you look at just the sample button that I have here, you have gap, you have padding, you have a ton of different ways, radius, like you could add number variables to a lot of different things. And again, a lot of this can be done in mode swapping. Again, especially if you wanted to go from one device size to another device size, we do have some videos on that. So be sure to check those out. But just in the purpose of changing your number variables, how would you do so? And there's a number of ways that we can look at that. So of course, let's open up our local variables here and let's create some number variables. Let's go maybe 4, and then maybe let's go 8 as well. So number 1, and then we have our number 2. Now, there's a couple different things that I'm going to look at here. So let's look at maybe just change this to 1. Let's change this to 7. Is what we actually want to have happen here. Maybe we'll just stick with one number for now. Same with rectangle. Is let's go ahead and actually apply this number variable. So if I'm looking to apply the number variable, I would apply it at the text layer here. So I'm going to go ahead and apply that variable itself from what you can see that it changed from 1 to 4. Now, number variables are also specific to things like buttons and quarter radiuses as well. So let's look at another example. If maybe I was to just set the radius to that number 1, which in this case would be 4. Maybe let's zoom in here just so you can see the interaction of it. So I can see that now that corner has that nice curvature. And again, maybe we want to actually change that number variable on a particular button click to go from 4 to 8, which in the case of what we have our local variables here from 4 to 8. So very similar as we did with colors is we're going to hit our button here and we're going to add an interaction that's going to say on click. We're going to set the variable number 1, but this time, instead of us having to enter in sort of a raw value like we did with colors, is we can actually enter and select that second variable from 4 to 8. So if all goes to plan, then what you would actually want to have happen when you hit this change variable button is, I'm going to just change this to button just so we don't get mixed up, is that when we hit this change variable button, both the number 4 will change to 8 and also the radius will get a little bit more round, going from that 4 to 8 value. So let's go ahead and make sure we did this correctly. So let's go ahead and present that. Let's fill that screen. And if I hit change variable, I can see that it went to 8. And if you look closely, you can see that the corner got a little bit more curved. So exactly as we were hoping to achieve here. So now with our number variables out of the way, let's take a quick look at mode swapping. We won't go too in depth on that because a lot of times if you're looking to change the number variables between your different prototypes, is mode swapping is what a lot of designers will actually have happen. But we're just going to take a real quick look at that next before we get into string variables. So the other thing that number variables are often used for is making your elements on your device, on your prototype, adjust between device sizes so you can show how truly responsive that those are. So let's take a quick look at modes and how we can achieve that using our number variables. Again, we're not going to go too deep into modes today. We do have plenty of other videos talking about modes from the standpoint of multi-brand design systems and more. So be sure to check those out if you are looking to dive a little bit deeper into your mode swapping. But for now, let's just go, again, because this is a beginner's overview, let's talk about how we can go from one number variable to another that would be a little bit smaller on a smaller device size. So let's go ahead and bring in our button here. And one thing I did notice right away is that this is set to fixed. So let's set that to hug and hug. There we go. So let's go ahead in our local variables and let's create some other number variables. So let's create a number variable that we're going to call padding 1. And let's create another one that we're going to call padding 2. Let's maybe set padding 1 to, 25 or so to start. And padding 2, let's set that to 20. We'll roll with that to start off. So let me move that over there. And now what we're going to do is go ahead and just apply this padding to our button here. So let's apply padding 1, horizontal, and then let's apply padding 2. And maybe we'll make this a little bit longer. Let's actually set this to 50, something like that. So that might be a decent looking button for our desktop. But if I was to bring this into a mobile frame, it takes up a good chunk of the screen. So maybe we want it to be a little bit smaller, a little bit tighter, both horizontally and vertically as well. Now I'm going to undo that because we don't want to have those values set to fixed. Keep those set to hug. But what we would actually have to do here is we would have to, instead of dragging it as I just did, because again, that would set your constraints to fixed and fixed instead of hug and hug, is we actually want to add a different mode. Now, your mode allows you to change values based on things like a device size or even on the brand level as well. Again, as I mentioned, I won't go too deep into that for now. This is more so just to get your feet wet if you're new to the concept. So what this is essentially saying is we have this button here, which has our mode 1. And maybe if we applied mode 2 to this smaller device size, maybe we want these paddings to change. So maybe we want padding 1 on mode 2 to go to 25 and padding 2 to maybe go to something like 15. No idea if those values work, but we'll roll with it. Now, you'll notice is that the button stayed the same even when I adjusted those padding values. And the reason being is I haven't actually told Figma what mode this frame should be pulling from. So if I was to look at the desktop as an example, and I was to go at the layer level and over this button right here where I can change the variable mode, I could see that it's automatically applying mode 1, which is where those 50 and 25 values, if I'm not mistaken, and the 50 and 20 values are pulling from. So what I would then want to do is set our basics to mode 2. And let me zoom in so I can show you what happens when I do that. Mode 2. And I can see that that button shrank accordingly. So when it comes to your number variables, working with things like your padding and your gap, even things like your corner radius as well, maximum and widths, all great example of how number variables can make your prototype come to life. So, and it's also great if you really want to impress your boss, a hiring manager, a stakeholder, using that concept to show them that you know how responsive design works and can make your make your components and designs also responsive. So now when I take this button from mode 1 and drag it into mode 2, notice how it adjusts in size, and bring it back into the desktop mode. I can see how it gets a little bit larger. And again, mode swapping is a ton of different use cases for it, specifically if you're building out a multi-brand design system, working with things like dark mode. And again, we do have a ton of other videos on that. So be sure to check out our variables playlist where you can learn more. Next, what we're going to do is look at our string variables. All right, now let's go ahead and look at our string variables. Now, when Figma first launched your string variables, one thing that a lot of designers got tripped up on is this little text icon next to string. And their first instinct is, oh, great, I can use variables for things like my type scale and building out my font library for variables. But Figma actually didn't release that feature, being able to build out your type variable library, until May of this year. And we do have a really in-depth video on that if that's you building out your design system. So be sure to check out our variables playlist. But what string variables are actually really good for is actually changing the text on a screen. And a good example of this would be if you have an online store where it's all of a sudden, 5 are available, and then all of a sudden when no more are available, being able to actually change the wording to that to being 0 or we are out of stock. So that's a really great example of what the beauty of type variables and how you can use them to build a really interactive prototype. So let's take a quick look at that using that current example. So let's go ahead and build out a string variables here. And sorry, whenever I talk about string variables, sometimes I do say type variables instead. So forgive me, string variables. So let's go with string 1, and let's add another string 2. So for string 1, maybe we want this to say 5 are available. And then string 2, we are out of stock. So something like that. So let's go ahead and just add some text that just says hello. And with this is we don't actually want to simply just copy in, if I go to my local variables here, the text from our first string, is we can actually just apply it. And that text is going to change regardless. So if I was to select our hello there, and under this variable icon right here, apply that variable, and we're going to apply string 1, I can see that string 1 is applied and the text is actually changed. If I was to go ahead then and adjust this, 5 are available, hello, I can see that adjusts with it. But if you do have a string variable applied, be sure you don't adjust the text at this level, because if I do that and write hello, I can see that that string variable is no longer applied. So very similar to what we did with our number variables and our color variable is let's use this change variable button here and add an interaction that's going to stay on click. We're going to set the variable string 1 to string 2, and that is going to change the text. So let's go ahead and present this. So I can see that 5 are available. I look to change that variable, and now I can see that it says we are out of stock. So very similar to number and color variables, using the same interaction method on a button to change your string variables accordingly. Next, what we're going to do is actually look at our Boolean variables, because those are much different. All right, now let's go ahead and look at our Boolean variables. And Boolean variables are really different because unlike your local variables, that are current local variables that we see here, where there's different values of them, your Boolean variables is actually a toggle. So you're not actually entering anything into your Boolean variables itself. And when I'm working with new designers or designers come to me at UI Collective and ask questions around Boolean variables who are still confused around the concept, what I like to break it down with is Boolean variables is literally just deciding whether or not you want to show or hide something. That's the easiest way to look at it. Where in the case of Boolean variables, false would be to hide it and true would be to show it. That's how to break it down in really its most simple form. So a really great example of this, and again, this is an example that I always tend to use, is because designers oftentimes don't really know when a Boolean variable should be applied or why it should be applied, is if you had a web page here, and maybe let's add frames. Let's go with just a simple desktop frame here. And let's say you had something like a welcome banner. So when someone logs into your platform for the first time, maybe it says, welcome to UI Collective. Sorry, I don't have the best built component right here. But maybe it says, welcome to UI Collective. And, you don't always want that banner to be there. Or maybe there's something on your element that when you're doing, or something on your design that when you're going through some type of user testing that you actually want the user to hide, click close. So what you can actually do is hide that upon click in a prototype, hide or show something using Boolean variables. So what I'm actually going to do is here I just have this simple banner here with a welcome banner, something you might see when you log into an application for the first time. And I'm going to go ahead and apply this Boolean variable. Now, everyone, this is a really weird UX, if you ask me, from Figma. A lot of designers often complain about it, is there's no real easy way to apply this Boolean variable. Everyone seems to say, okay, I can't apply anything. I don't see it. Where's that variable icon where I can apply that Boolean variable? What you actually have to do is look for this little eye here at the layer level. It's not at the fill level, but at the layer level. And I'm on a Mac, so I'm going to two-finger click on my trackpad. And there I can see that the Boolean variable is now eligible for me to connect to this banner element. So I'm going to go ahead and connect that. And you'll notice that it's showing. And if I go into my local variables here, it's because this is set to true. If I was to go ahead and set this to false, look what happens. It actually hides. So there's that show and hide functionality that we're talking about here. And I'm just going to change this to show banner. So then if I was to bring in a button, so let me just copy a button from our number, and then let's go ahead and just clear that interaction of it. So now if I wanted to show this button upon a user first logging in, and then when they hit, actually, no, we're not going to use that button, but we're going to hit this little X. So when they hit the X, the Boolean changes from true, which is show, to false, which is hide. This banner will then disappear. So at this X value, we are going to set it on click. We're going to set the variable, show banner, and then we can select false. So now if I was to go ahead and play this prototype, present, and let's just fit the screen real quick. So then if I was to go ahead and hit this X, I can see that that Boolean variable then went from true to false, thus hiding the element. So hopefully that's a real great example and something that makes sense as to how Boolean variables can work in the context of your prototype. So showing and hiding things based on a certain user interaction. All right, so now that we're familiar with just the basics of prototyping with variables, how they go from one variable to another, and how Boolean variables work, let's look at a more complex example. We're actually going to use string variables in order to change the variant of a main component. So we're actually going to do this using an image slider functionality, or carousel functionality, excuse me. So let's just build a really quick button here. Let's make it black and add the fill to white. Oops, the text color to white, excuse me. And there we go. And let's just make it a little bit bigger. And let's just say, call this next. So next picture, next, something like that. Again, it's not very pretty, but it will get the point across nice and easily. So if you know me by now, you will know that I'm a big fan of the soccer team, Chelsea FC. So what I have here is simply just three different variants of one image component. So what we have here is variant 1, variant 2, and variant 3. And let's go ahead and actually change these to image 1, image 1, image 2, image 2, and then image 3. So what eventually I want to have happen is that when I hit this next button in the prototype is that this image will go from 1 for change from image 1 to image 2 and then to image 3. So again, showing how we can change the variants using our variables within a prototype. Now, let's set up our variables for this. Let's go into our local variables, and then let's go ahead and create 3 string variables. So let's just call it 1, 2, and then 3 as the names. And then for the values themselves, the values of our variables need to match the name of the variant. So in this case, 1 will be image1, 2 will be image2, and it is also case sensitive. And then 3 will be image3. So what I want to have happen then is I want to apply the variable to image1. So I'm not doing it at the component level. I'm doing it at the design level, or the prototype level, or the instance level, I guess you could say. So when I select the variants in my prototype, I can see here I can choose between image1, image2, or image3. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is actually just set this to image1, and then apply the image1 variable. And I can see that that's set to 1. And what maybe I'm actually going to do here is just change these to image1, image2, and then image3, just to keep it consistent. Now, notice how I can see that it says image1, and let's go into our local variables here, and let's maybe change this to image1, 2. Now look what happens. Figma's actually crossed out the name of the variable because the variable value doesn't map to an individual variant. So your string variables, if you're looking to prototype or change the variants, using your variables in a prototype is that the value of your variables needs to match the name of your variant itself. So now we can actually go ahead and begin to build this prototype. So on click, we want to set the variable image1 to image2. Let's try that out. We can present. Let's go ahead and just fill screen. And notice how that changes accordingly. Whereas in the past, what you might have to do is have different frames for each of the different images, but now it's all within one. So then if I was to go, I can go, if I want to change image2 to image3, I can set the variable, let's move this up. On click, set the variable image2 to image3. Let's then go ahead and let's reset our prototype here. I'm going to go ahead and present that. Let's fill that screen. What I can then do is when I hit that once, I can see it changes to image2. And when I hit it again, I can see it changes to image3. So again, a real quick example as to how we can use our string variables in order to change the variants within our prototype. All right, another thing that you can actually do with variables is actually change the variable mode. And depending on your use case, this can come in super handy. Maybe you want to toggle between brands as a user leaves a certain part of your prototype. But again, this was something that Figma actually did not have to start when they launched variables. It was hotly requested, and then they added it relatively recently last year. So as I mentioned, you actually also have the ability to change your modes here. So let's go ahead and get this set up so I can show you how this functionality works. So what I'm going to do is actually just create some modes here. So I have a light mode and a dark mode. So let's add a page color background. On light mode, this will be white. On dark mode, this will be black. Let's add a button background color and then a text background color. So let's go ahead and set the background color of our button on a white background to be black, keep the text as white, and then let's just inverse it. So on a black background in dark mode, we'll set our button background to white and our text to that black. So let's then go ahead and what I have here is just a real simple button. Let's go ahead and apply those variables. So add the background, add the text color, and then also add the frame layer as well. We'll add that as page color. So then what I can actually do is with this button itself, under interactions, on click, we are going to set the variable mode to dark because Figma is reading that is currently in auto, which is like that light mode, again, which is our first mode. So then let's go ahead and present this prototype. And if all goes to plan, I will see that the background color will change from white to black. the background color of our button will change to white, and the color of our text will change to black, because again, that is what is defined in our second mode. Oops, where to go? Let me expand that. In our second mode, there we have it. So let's try it out. Boom, just like that. So you also have the ability to change your mode using prototyping with variables. Okay, so now let's look at some of the more complex elements associated with prototyping with our variables, specifically prototyping with your variables using math, and then also some conditional logic associated. So here I just have some a real sample UI, not very pretty, but it's just enough in order to get the point across. So what we actually want to have happen here is we have this basket of apples, and just pretend this is an online store. So I can see that there's 3 baskets of apples that are available. When I add this to my cart, when I add 1 basket to my cart, I want to reduce the number of baskets that are available by 1, while at the same time increasing the number of items in my cart by 1. Let's go ahead and take a close look at how to achieve this. So let's open up our local variables and let's create some number variables. 1 for baskets available. We're going to set that to 3. And then let's put cart items, and let's set that to 0 to start. And as we looked at the first part of this video, let's go ahead and apply our number variables, so the cart items, and then the number of baskets that are available. Now let's go ahead and build out the prototyping logic for this. So click our button, and this button is going to state that when on click, we're going to set the variable baskets available to baskets available minus 1. What that's actually going to do is that when this button is clicked, it's going to set the value of 3 to minus 1 every time that add to cart button is clicked. Now, a mistake I often see a lot of designers doing is that when they're setting a variable, they often tend to just try to put baskets available to minus 1. And that's not actually going to achieve our desired result here. Let's take a closer look at that. So if I was to just fill the screen here, I can see that what that actually does is it doesn't reduce it by 1. It just sets the value to minus 1. But again, we don't want that to happen. We want it to go down 1 each time. So let's go back and adjust our logic here. So on click, we want to set baskets available to baskets available. So what this is saying, we're setting the value of 3 to 3 minus 1. So now if I was to do that same thing and I was to present this, and then let's go ahead and fill the screen, I can see it reduces by 1. So again, we're not setting the whole variable to minus 1. We're setting the variable to the variable itself. That variable value will then decrease by 1 every time that button is clicked. So it's a mistake that I often do see a lot of designers making when they're experimenting with prototyping using math in your variables for the very first time. Now, one thing we didn't do here is we didn't also increase the number of items in our cart by 1. So we're going to take a really similar approach. So let's go ahead and close that prototype. And still on the same prototyping element here, prototyping chain. So on click, we're going to set the button, set the variable baskets available to baskets available minus 1. And what we also want to have happen here is set the variable cart items to cart items plus 1. And what that's going to do is, again, when this button is clicked, it's also going to increase the number of items in our cart the number of items that are in our cart by 1 each time. Let's then go ahead and present this. Fill that screen. If all goes to plan, baskets available will decrease by 1, and the number of items in our cart will increase by 1. There we go. I think that works perfect here. Now, hopefully that's a real good introduction as to how we can use math in order to create these sort of real-life prototypes using our variables. But one thing that you'll see here is that we don't have any baskets of apples that are available. It's at 0. But we still have the ability to add to cart and actually go into some negative values. And if you're going through some user testing, you're building out the most realistic version of your prototype possible, you don't want to have that happen. So how can we avoid having that happen? And maybe when the basket's available equals 0, this button is actually hidden so the user can't actually click it. In order to achieve that, we actually have to use something called conditional logic, and let's take a look at that next. All right, now let's look at some conditional logic. And as I mentioned, we don't want to be able to have the number of baskets available go into the negatives. So again, when the number of baskets that are available equals to 0, we actually want to hide this add to cart button. So again, the user won't be able to add any more baskets to their cart. Now, think back to the first part of this video, and how would we accomplish that? We would accomplish that using our Boolean variables. So let's go ahead in our local variables and create a Boolean variable that's going to say show button. Now, let's go ahead and apply this variable to our button itself. So remember, at the layer level, I'm going to two-finger tap and apply that variable. Now, you'll notice that it disappeared. And this is because, again, our Boolean variable is set to false, which we don't want to have happen, especially if there's 3 baskets that are available. We want to be showing that button for the user so they can add those baskets to their cart and only hide that button when there are no baskets available. So I'm going to go ahead and toggle that on to true for now. Now let's go ahead in our conditional logic. Let's create some conditional logic, So with this add to cart button, so just as a refresher, we have on click, so the number of baskets available to baskets available -1. So every time this button is clicked, the number of baskets available decreases, and then the number of cart items would also increase. Now, when this number of baskets available is equal to 0, we want to hide this add to cart button. In order to do that, we need our conditional logic. So I'm going to set some conditional logic that's going to state if the number of baskets available, so our variable baskets available, is equal to 0. So basically saying that when this value right here is equal to 0, which is reflected in our local variables, so the number of baskets available, when this is equal to 0, we are going to set the variable show button to false. So using our conditional logic, we're basically saying if this happens, we're going to do this. So now let's go ahead and try this out. So let's close that, open up our prototype, and let's present it. Let's fit the screen here. So I'm going to add to cart once. See the number of baskets of apples available goes down by 1, and the number of items in our cart goes up by 1. And now the number of baskets available is equal to 0, so we no longer have the ability to add any more baskets of apples to our cart. And that's a real quick introduction as to how we can use conditional logic to create truly interactive prototypes.